So you think you want to be a nurse? Who hurt you? Obviously, I'm just kidding, but there is so much more to nursing than I ever realized, and I feel like my perception of nursing changes every single year. You do go into it a little bit naive, you go into it excited, you've learned all these new skills, and you can't wait to help people, and that first year is just a whirlwind. You're learning things, you're learning about people, you're learning how to help people and touch people and dress people. Obviously, it depends on what you're doing. My first year was in a nursing home, so I did a lot more ADLs, fed people, had a hefty pill pass, helped with getting dressed, changing those depends. But there were also a lot of things that I learned from that because there's not many resources in a nursing home. So we would have people with NG tubes that would get confused and pull them out. I can't tell you how many NG tubes I reinserted, and I became an absolute expert at that. So when I went to a hospital, nobody likes inserting NG tubes because it makes the patient feel, it's not comfortable for the patient. It's a little uncomfortable to hear as the nurse. You're afraid you're hurting somebody. You don't want it to go in their lungs. Turns out at the nursing home, I got more experience putting in NG tubes than a lot of these nurses had in the hospital. So there are certain things that it really did prepare me for. But why did I go into nursing to begin with? I don't have some people have great stories. They're like, yeah, my family member had this disease and the nurses were great or the nurses were terrible and I thought I could make a change. So I became a nurse. Or I had a disease and my nurses were great or my nurses were terrible and I want to make a change. So I became a nurse. I like science. That's why I became a nurse. It was kind of a progressive interest. In high school, there are a lot of programs where you can see different career fields. And initially, I was in engineering, and that was pretty cool. There's a lot you can do with engineering. We got to play with like 3D printers and AutoCAD. That part was interesting. That part was neat. Plus, it just felt cool. You don't hear a ton about female engineers, and I felt like a badass. I'm like, yeah, this is cool. And then the next semester, or maybe the next year, I don't remember, it focused on biomedical engineering. So I'm like, that's a pretty cool program too. Let's check it out. And then I learned a little bit more about how the body functions and how we use that functionality to develop things like prosthetics, or how we have to think about materials that the body won't reject when we're developing certain things. And that piqued my interest a little bit more. I'm like, this class is even better than the last class. Frankly, in the last class, we started talking about like a heat loss through a roof, and it lost me. There's so much Greek in engineering. Probably not good to lose interest within the first year of a high school intro class. But with the biomedical engineering, it was different. It was super interesting. It held my attention the whole time. And so because the biology part of the biomedical engineering was so interesting, the following year, I went ahead and went into, I think they called it a med tech program. And it's a very general pre-nursing type program. You get some college credits through it. They taught you about phlebotomy. They taught you about emergency medicine, like EMTs. You got your EMT basic at the end of it if you passed the national registry test. Oh, and you could get your STNA license as well through it. You didn't have to pick one each semester. They would go through something, and we got to poke each other with needles, which they don't even do in nursing school, but they're doing it in high school. And I found that very interesting. You got to do ride-alongs on ambulances, and we got to do some clinical time in a nursing home, talk with patients, help feed patients. So after that, I was pretty hooked. I'm like, yeah, all of this is interesting. I haven't lost interest in any of this. Nursing's the way to go. I think the thing that really drilled it in for me is they took us on a trip to one of the local hospitals, and there was a presentation by a nurse, and I didn't completely understand it at the time, but she had an alphabet out after her name. It was Jane Doe, BSN, RN, CCRN, CNO. I'm not sure what she had, but she had a ton of letters after her name. She'd done a little bit of everything, and that's what she talked to us about. She talked to us about how she had worked with children in her career. She had worked with the elderly in her career. She had done bedside nursing. She had done OR nursing. She had done some administration, and she can just pick what she wants to do as long as it's within her practice. And she was never bored. She found something to interest her and keep it exciting. And I saw that, and I thought, wow, with the one degree, with a nursing degree, I can go in and change within the hospital. It's not like quitting a job necessarily. You're just changing units, changing floors. So it's like an acceptable way to just do different types of jobs without like in a traditional type job. If you work at Taco Bell, I mean, I worked at Taco Bell while I was in nursing school. And if I wanted to change something in Taco Bell, I could go from warming up the food, cooking the food, to doing the dishes. That was the change. But here at the hospital, you could go to a completely different unit and see new things, learn new things. So that's what got me interested in nursing. It's not monumental, but I almost roll my eyes when I do hear monumental story. How many people have monumental stories? I just might not be super emotional, I guess. And there are a lot of people out there that are maybe a little bit more emotional than me and things really stick, and good for them, I guess. But for me, it's interesting, and that's why I picked it. Do I want to help people? Sure. I don't want to not help people. I don't want to hurt people. I'm not a bad person. Um, but what drew me in was the interest in science and how we can help patients by adjusting medications, and the medications, how they work in the body, and how we can do surgeries and keep people alive with different pieces of equipment and pumps and all these cool things. So that sucked me in. And from there, my aunt was a nurse, and I knew that she liked it. I knew it was stable. I knew that between nursing homes and hospitals and home care, everybody needs a nurse. There is no shortage of a need for nurses. So I thought, safe choice, interesting choice. Let's go for it. So I'm pretty sure I'm a little cynical now. I think if I would have gone through some questions or talked about nursing earlier on in my career, I would probably have some different opinions than I do now. I think I was pretty excited when I started, and I liked most things about it. I was definitely wore out because I was at the nursing home and I knew the director of nursing there. That's how I got in. So when I started nursing, it was a time when you needed experience. So post 2020, post COVID, hospitals and facilities are just like, bring me the nurses. We need help. Anybody will do. Did you graduate? I need you. Come here and help us. When I graduated, it was like, do you have experience? No, no one will hire me yet. I don't have any experience. But I knew someone who worked at this nursing home. She ended up becoming the director of nursing. And she said, this is she was right. This is no place for a nurse to spend her whole career. There are not enough resources, and the work it can be very physical and demanding. And she wanted me to kind of keep working up. So she said she'll give me a year at this nursing home, and after that year, I better find myself a hospital job because she doesn't want me getting stuck in a nursing home. And I learned a lot. And then I went it was nearly a year to the day I went and I got a hospital job. And in a way, well, I guess let me go back. So the nursing home job was so demanding because I did know the nurse who ended up becoming the director of nursing, and they were short staffed. Everybody's short staffed all the time. That was 12 years ago. 12 years ago, they were short staffed, and she would call me. She just passed away recently, but she was a family friend. That's how I knew her. That's how I talked with her. And she would say, "Hey, Jess, Auntie Barb needs a little help at the nursing home tonight. Do you think you could pick up an extra shift?" Auntie Barb, or "Hey, Jess, it's Auntie Barb. We need a little extra help. We need this or that." And it's real hard saying no to her. She got me my first job. I'm going to say yes. So I worked so many hours my first year as a nurse. And at the time, I think when I got in there, I was making 24 bucks an hour, which now new grads make way more than that. But I came from Taco Bell. So I came from making like $8.75 to 24 bucks an hour. I was thrilled. Plus I was working a ton of hours. Like, nursing was pretty good in my book. So then I went to a step down unit. I had applied in the emergency department, but they asked me a couple clinical scenario questions and they must not have liked my answer. So they're like, maybe you should get some experience on the floor before you come to the emergency department. So they sent me up to a step down unit, which again is nearly unheard of. Most units will take whatever they can get at this point. So lucky me, they didn't think I had what it took. So I went step down, and I spent probably 2.5 years there, and it was great. I loved the people I worked with. I worked midnights. Like, I liked my weekend so much. We would go on vacations together. We would, someone would book a cabin. We'd all throw our money in, and we would spend the weekend at a cabin with a swimming pool, doing a little drinking, hanging out. It was a really good group. I have not run into that again. I've run into people that I enjoy working with, but I don't know if an experience like that will ever come around for me again. But it was fun while it lasted. And we all slowly started going our separate ways, taking different jobs in different units. And again, I learned a lot there. I became charge nurse pretty early on, learned how to do things from different perspectives. And while I was there, of course, we had emergencies. You can't determine when a patient is going to need extra help or is going to start deteriorating. So we would have emergencies that we would have to call rapids. I never had to call code. I didn't have to call code till I was in the ICU. I was already like a nurse for 4 or 5 years before I had my first code. So either I took like really good care of my patients or somebody was looking down on me and they were like, she can't handle it yet. But we would call rapid responses. And depending on who came to our rapid response, it was usually the CCU charge nurse. But if they were busy for some reason, the ICU charge nurse would respond to it, or maybe the patient was really sick and it was a good thing we called the rapid response and they had to go to the ICU. We would roll that patient down to the ICU. Those nurses were assholes. They were so mean. They're like, oh, here comes another floor nurse that didn't know how to take care of her patient. Good thing they finally checked on them. A lot of my buddies had quit and gone different places, gone to OR nursing. One had just graduated NP school. One had gone to the like CVS ICU, the open heart unit, essentially. It was my turn to figure out where the hell I wanted to go. And I had always kind of wanted to do ICU work. So I ended up applying at the other local hospital. There are two that are pretty close to each other, and I live pretty close to both of them. And I applied to that ICU. And again, they asked me some clinical questions, and they must not have loved my answers. And they said, well, she seems like she'll be an okay nurse, but I don't think she's ready for the ICU. So they sent me to a step down unit at this other hospital. And their transfer policy is you cannot transfer until you have been a nurse at this hospital for a year. At the hospital I'd come from, the transfer policy was 6 months. You spend 6 months on the floor, and then you can transfer to a different unit if you wanted to. But I went ahead and I started in that other hospital step down unit. It was neurosurgical. So I did get to see a lot of cool things. It was the first time I had dealt with like A-lines, and they had some ventriculostomies and they had some intrathecal pumps. But the nurses were kind of assholes. So I had come into this with, what did I say, about 2.5 years on the floor, about a year in long-term care, like 3.5 years of nursing under my belt, which I am not a cocky person. I don't fling that around. That's still, fairly new anyhow. But, oh, I was talked down to so many times by nurses who are newer than me just because the policies were different than at my other hospital. They also seemed to have it was just a feeling on the unit, a feeling that I did not fit in. So I spent, I think 6 months. I think I did like 5 or 6 months there. And I ended up going back to the hospital I came from and applying to their ICU, and I got in. And that was where I had dealt with all the assholes before when I was dropping my patients off. And if you're one of them, they're not as big of assholes. But I'm not going to lie, we're still kind of assholes. I'm not. I try and be nice. There's no reason to be mean to somebody. I can understand how it's frustrating when a patient is crumping and maybe the other nurse that isn't used to crumping patients is giving you details that you're really not that concerned about, but they're kind of panicked. That's all right. We'll figure it out. That's part of our jobs. It's fine. Don't yell at them. But that's when I started in the ICU. And that was in 2017. And I've spent quite a bit of time there now. I did leave one other time. I think it was the end of 2021 to do a little bit of travel nursing just around Ohio. And that was fun. I got to go to some level 1 trauma centers. All the hospitals in my area are level 2 trauma centers. So I went down to Columbus and I worked at level 1. And it was really cool. It was neat seeing how a different hospital system operated. And it operated very nice. I really liked it, but my husband works in this area, all of our families in this area, and it really wasn't worth the drive for me or the money spent on housing, even with the travel nurse stipends. So I did a couple more local travel gigs, and then I ended up just coming back to my home hospital because I really like the atmosphere. It's one of those places that they smile in the hallways when they see each other. They say hello, they say good morning. And even if in high stress situations, sometimes you can come across some assholes. Overall, people are pretty friendly there. I already knew most of the employees. I already knew most of the nurse practitioners and the doctors, and it just felt easy to slide back into. And it was also in the ICU where we took care of quite a few psychiatric patients because of our staffing ratios, our 2-to-1 patient to nurse ratios. They would send acutely psychiatric patients to us to keep a closer eye on them. And it was interesting. You could see the stigma when we knew there was a psych patient coming. And no one will say it like out loud or admit to it, but there were looks. Oh, here comes that patient. Did you look at their diagnosis? And it was never as bad as people expected it to be. And that's when I kind of started getting interested in learning more about why we thought this way and how the patients were and how they were treated. And I also, at that point, was starting to have my own issues because of working through COVID, where I had some anxiety symptoms, I had some depressive type symptoms, nothing severe, but enough that I wanted to seek out a PMHNP for myself to try and make things a little easier for myself. And I think between having those patients in the ICU and technically being a patient myself with my own PMHNP and being a nurse for 9 or 10 years at that point, that was when I started thinking, I can't do floor nursing forever. It seems to be getting worse every year. It's time to go back to school, but I don't know what I want to go back to school for. A family practice, they get beat on quite a bit, but you can do a lot with that degree. It wouldn't have been a bad way to go. Critical care or acute care, definitely not critical care. I see what our nurse practitioners go through in the unit, and they get their asses kicked. I've already gotten my ass kicked. I'm ready to go into, somebody else, a different adrenaline junkie can have it. I'm ready to settle into an office type setting. And then I got to further exploring the PMHNP route, and there were so many options that I didn't realize we could have in that field, which is why I got into nursing to begin with. There's so many options. So then I saw you could do inpatient, you could do outpatient, you could do acute care. I said like acutely psychiatric, or you could do like the me patients, the a little bit anxious, a little bit depressed. We just have to optimize those brain chemicals. You could do subspecialties. You could do substance abuse, alcohol abuse. You could do pediatric cases, geriatric cases. There's so much more to it than I realized. And that's when I started looking and applying at colleges. And now here we are in our third semester of the PMHNP program.
Hey, future Jessica here. Let's go ahead and end this one here. I ended up going off on a different topic and it would have been way too long. So this is essentially my nursing story, start to present, kind of. Hope you guys enjoyed it and hopefully you can relate. Tell me about your nursing story, or if you want to get into nursing, why you want to get into nursing. I will see you next time.